Heaven's Gate, one of the most notorious cults of the last century. Much like Scientology, many of the group's beliefs are based around science fiction. Their core belief was that the human body was merely a vessel that limited the true abilities of the soul, and that through the loss of life, one could be transformed into an immortal being that has the power to travel through the far reaches of space. I'm sure you could probably see where this is going. On March 26, 1997, 39 members of Heaven's Gate were found unresponsive in a San Diego home. They had collectively decided to ascend. There have been many destructive cults in the modern era, but what's interesting about Heaven's Gate is that they had a website. In fact, they still have a website. You can visit it today. They had changed it right before their ascension, but since then, for the last 26 years, it's sat untouched. Heavensgate.com is part of the dead internet, the remnants of the old web that's been sitting abandoned and rotting, much like the ruins of civilizations past. Because of Web 1.0's decentralized nature, the dead internet is often much more quirky and weird than the internet we use today. It also doesn't just consist of old websites, it can be any part of the information superhighway that hasn't been modified by human hands in many years. Today we're going to dive deep into this peculiar, dilapidated, and sometimes unsettling slice of cyberspace. Join me as we explore the dead internet iceberg. Alright, so first up in level 1 of this iceberg, we have the Wayback Machine. The Wayback Machine lets you visit snapshots of websites through time. For example, if we type in google.com, we can visit the 1998 version of Google. While the Wayback Machine is cool, I don't want to talk about websites that have been taken down and can only be visited through an archive. In this video, I want to focus on live websites you can still visit on the modern internet. So everything going forward will only be websites that still exist, at least at the time of making this video. Also on level 1, we have some famous examples of the dead internet, like thisman.org. This site claims that the man depicted on the page has appeared in thousands of people's dreams, and it shows us a list of testimonies as well as some theories as to who or what this man is. Most notably, that he could be a depiction of God himself. Ever dreamed this man was a huge meme back in the day? I remember being a little freaked out by a YouTube video that discussed the phenomenon back in 2010. But in the end, it was all a hoax devised by Italian sociologist Andrea Nutella, who came up with the site as a piece of performance art. I also vaguely remember a parody of the site with a picture of Obama instead of this man, but I couldn't find much info on that. Ted the Caver. I've actually already talked about Ted the Caver in my haunting video, go check that out if you haven't seen it yet, but Ted the Caver might have been the first creepypasta on the internet. The reason I'm bringing it up again now is because it was originally passed around as an Angel Fire website, which is still live today. It hasn't been modified since 2001. Ted the Caver follows the journey of two cavers, Ted and his friend, who's just referred to as B, as they discover and map out an unexplored passageway in a cave, which they name Floyd's Passage. The opening to the passage is just a tiny hole, only 5 inches in diameter, so they start chipping away at it to make the opening big enough for a human body to fit through. Eventually, Ted is able to fit his body through the tight tunnel and ends up finding a cavern with some strange-looking cave art. It depicts what appears to be humans below an unusual symbol. I won't spoil the rest though. Dead multiplayer games. This one isn't a website, but it is a dead piece of the internet nonetheless. Have you ever booted up one of your favorite childhood multiplayer games only to be greeted with a completely barren player base? In some games, you'll just endlessly wait for a match that never comes, but other games like the original Counter-Strike just have a lot of empty servers. Joining one of these servers is a weird experience. The atmosphere of the game gets completely flipped on its head. Instead of gunshots, radio chatter, and footsteps, you just hear the ambient sounds of the map. You can still play the objective if you want, but what's the point? With no other players to stop you, there's no challenge anymore. You start to explore the level because that's all there is to do, and it just doesn't feel right. After all, this space was never meant to be explored, it was only designed to be a venue for a gunfight. You start to notice little things that don't make sense, like, what are all these doors that are so high up on the wall? What are they there for? And what is this room supposed to be? A sauna with a ladder to the roof? All the heat would escape through that hole, what's the point? The architecture and the natural world don't make sense, but then again, you were never supposed to pay so much attention to them. Overall, it's just an eerie experience. And this experience inspired the indie game No Players Online. The start to no players online is very similar to starting up the original Counter-Strike. You're met with a list of empty servers and you choose to join one. You get dropped into an empty map and you have no choice but to explore and to play the objective. The game mode here is capture the flag, so you go to the other end of the map to pick up the enemy's flag to bring back to your side of the map. On the way back, you start to hear some eerie music. You come across a phonograph, which you of course decide to shoot because why wouldn't you? This leads to some very unsettling events. Again, I'm not going to spoil it. And with that, we're now done level 1. We're about to move on to level 2. Weird and oddly specific sites. Say, do you like cat pictures? Well, how about fungi pictures? Or fish pictures, or bird pictures, or microscope pictures, or pirate pictures. You could find a website for anything on Web 1.0. Without established platforms to post to, if you wanted to post your content on the internet, you had to make a website for it. This led to some strangely specific websites, like the web's first Japanese pizza page, which was created in 1995 and was last updated in 2006. On this site, we have, well, pictures of pizzas from Japan. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Asparagus broccoli pizza. I don't know how I feel about that. Oh, it says here that there's also the web's second page on Japanese pizza. Let's check that out. Oh, that's too bad. Automatic beyond belief. This website from 2006 is dedicated to a kind of toaster, specifically a radiant control toaster, which is apparently beautiful and performs much better than other kinds of toasters. Once a person has experienced a radiant control toaster, the common response is, this is how all toasters should work. The site also has some nice pictures of toasters as well as a guide to date your radiant control toaster, because people of course have toaster collections. Why not? StinkyMeat.net. This is a website from the year 2000 dedicated to a man of science and his experiment where he leaves meat outside every day and monitors its status as it rots. It's all for science, of course. In experiment 1, he leaves the meat in his yard, and I probably can't show you too far into this experiment because of how gross it gets, but it eventually ends when his neighbor throws out the plate of rotten meat. Some people are just very anti-science. Experiment 2 is a little more ambitious as it involves more meat and more locations. He leaves a full chicken, a hamburger, and a huge slice of salmon in a public park. Location 2 is inside a planter in a mall where he leaves 2 sausages, oysters, and dog food. Unfortunately, the mall experiment was cut short when the meat was thrown out by a janitor the same day it was left in the planter, so the brave scientist enlists help from another man known as Trevor the Shameless to dive in the dumpster to retrieve the disposed specimens, which he is unfortunately unable to do. In the park, however, the meat is left alone, and again, I can't show you pictures of rotting flesh on YouTube. On day 4, the park experiment receives a twist when the meat is completely gone from the plate. The scientists and Trevor the Shameless search for the missing specimens and find only the chicken 30 feet away from the plate. The experiment continues, this time with a cage put over the chicken to prevent further interference from wild animals. Oh, the things men do for science. The experiment continues and the chicken rots further. The scientist comes up with a new idea to start leaving plates of meat in more public places, like on top of a gas pump and in people's mailboxes. Look, I understand the need for scientific advancement, but this might be going just a little too far. Luckily, in the end, they did go and clean up everything themselves, but still probably illegal. StinkyMeat.net is obviously meant to be a joke, and so is our next topic, a site from 2002 called BlackPeopleLoveUs.com. The site is about 2 white people named Sally and Johnny, and how they have many black friends who like them a lot. There's lots of pictures with them and their friends, along with testimonials about just how cool Sally and Johnny are. Johnny calls me the man. That puts me at ease. It makes me feel comfortable because I am black, and that's how black folks talk to one another. Johnny always says, I'm not racist. One of my best friends is black. I think he might mean me. Johnny is generous enough to remark upon how articulate I am. That makes me feel good. Sally's always saying, you go girl, while raising the roof to mainstream hip-hop tracks at cheesy bars. That's fun. I relate to that. Sally always says things that make me feel special, like, you are so cool, you are different, you're not like other black people. The people who made blackpeopleloveus.com were clearly doing a little trolling, but it seems that people in 2002 were much easier to troll than they are today, and that's clear based on just how many angry comments they receive thinking the site is serious. But on top of that, there are many long comments from people who get the joke but just really have a lot to say about it, whether they liked it or not. I really am surprised at just how much discussion this site has stirred up. I really don't think it's that deep, it's just a stupid joke. Okay, I don't know how whatever we talk about next will be able to live up to blackpeopleloveus.com, but we're gonna find out. Next up, we've got far.net. It's just a picture of a hammer. Yvette's bridal formal. This one's from 2007, and wow, what is going on here? This is insane. By far, this is the craziest site I've come across in my research for this video. There's so much going on. I like these random Frutiger Aero Blender screenshots in the background. Yvette's bridal formal might be the most maximalist site on the internet. It really has everything, even a recipe for apple pie. It also has two different homepages. We've already looked at the regular homepage, but going to /default.html brings you to a different homepage. When clicking the home link on different pages, it's a bit of a crapshoot as to which homepage you'll be brought to. I'm just kind of blown away by this whole thing in general. I really don't know what to say about it. The site was created by an artist named Sean Terrence Bess, who made the website for his mother's dress store. Sean really takes the principles of maximalism to heart, maybe a little too much. From my research, his responses to questions from fans are absurdly long and rambling, just like his website. Sadly, Sean passed away from cancer in late 2021. Yvette's bridal formal stands untouched since 2010. HomePhoneWiring.com. This is a website about how to, well, wire your home phone. It doesn't seem very interesting or strange at first glance, but there's a link to learn the symbolic meaning for each wire color. Let's click it. As you can see, each color has a special Christian meaning attached to it. There's also a Christian poem on this page, and if that's not enough, there's a whole page on this site dedicated to converting non-believers. To its credit, HomePhoneWiring.com seems like a genuinely useful resource. If you have to wire a home phone, that is. But it also leads into the next level of this iceberg, religion and conspiracy sites. Life.org. This one's kind of hard to describe. It seems like some really hardcore anti-abortion page, but it might also be attached to some ministry. I wish I could give you some more of a narrative on this one, but the whole thing is just a bunch of schizo ranting. Some estimates are in excess of 20 million American babies per year that are killed through the use of so-called birth control and contraception. Fellas, does using a condom make you a murderer? Well, it doesn't say much about condoms, but they do have quite the bone to pick with birth control pills. So, yeah, taking birth control is literally murder. Wow, that's quite the liminal space. Okay, that's enough of that. Let's move on to JesusWithYouAlways.com. This early 2000s website shows us drawings of Jesus with a bunch of different people. I feel like I've seen some of these somewhere before years ago, but I can't remember the context. But just know, no matter who you are or where you are, Jesus is with you. Always watching, always observing, always judging. Okay, I remember where I've seen these before. I remember back in the day, people added captions to these photos. Some of them were pretty funny. Look, I don't want to cast too much shade on Jesus With You Always. This is worlds better than that mean-spirited site we looked at before. I definitely prefer a quirky positive religious site over a quirky negative one. Next up, we've got Dokimos.org, and wow, I'm loving this already. Much like Life.org, it's kind of hard to piece together what this site is supposed to be about. It's just a lot of rants about different things. There are some really out there designs on this site. Like I said, I'm enjoying it a lot. It's not just the designs that are out there though, they also say some bizarre things, like they have this long anti-Catholic page, which, you know, cool with the anti-Catholic remarks, huh? Each of these links go to a page that is like a splash screen with a dead link in the center. They all have outlandishly loud designs. One of them says wives should teach their husbands submission. Based. Also on this level, we have a few conspiracy theory sites, like Smoking Aloud. This 1996 site advocates for the rights of smokers. Did you know that the anti-smoking agenda is a slippery slope that will lead to a Nazi-like totalitarian state? Did you know that smoking is not a leading cause of cancer? In fact, smoking may actually be healthy for you. Maybe fewer cigarettes equals more cancer. So it makes sense that quitting is dangerous. So if smoking's so great, then who could possibly want to stop people from doing it? Why, the New World Order, of course. And Bill Clinton. Speaking of Bill Clinton, have you ever wondered if they've been cloning US presidents? Yeah, I've also been thinking about it a lot. This site from 2011 has a lot of valuable material on the subject. I mean, just look at this irrefutable proof. These are not the same person. The proof is in the nose. His smile and optimism, gone. So, why are US presidents being cloned? Because they're Satanists. That's why. You know, I couldn't make a video about the dead internet without talking about at least one UFO site. And the one I chose is a site from 1999 called Alien Enigma, and wow, CSS 2.0 is not holding up so well. Alien Enigma is a pretty standard wall of text conspiracy site, but I kinda like that. It reminds me of the sort of thing I might stumble upon late at night as a little kid. It has testimonials from fans of the site with their alien abduction experiences. It also has some nice UFO pictures, as well as some ways to know if you've been abducted. Have had self-esteem problems. Have neck or back problems, or awaken with unusual stiffness in any part of your body. Have had chronic nasal issues. Well, I guess I've been abducted. You know, I wanted to talk more about conspiracy sites in this video, but it seemed like a lot of these old conspiracy sites were still being updated. Yeah, I couldn't find many abandoned ones. It's too bad, because I have fond memories of being a kid and staying up late at night to browse through these weird theories about aliens, George Bush, and 9/11. Some of that stuff could be unsettling to my kid brain. And that's our next category. Not kid brains, but unsettling sites. Deathclock.com. This is a site from 2001. I actually remember this one from when I was a kid. You would put in your basic information and it would give you the date of your death, along with the amount of seconds you have to live. RosemaryJacobs.com. This is a site about a woman whose skin turned blue. Rosemary Jacobs was born in 1942 in New York. Her skin was normal as a child, but when she was 11 years old, she was prescribed colloidal silver nose drops for her allergies. These nose drops slowly turned all of her skin a grayish blue over time, and this change was permanent. There was no way to flush the color out. In 1978, however, Rosemary decided to try a radical technique to try to correct the color, dermabrasion. I can't show pictures of Rosemary without her outer layer of skin, but in the after photos, it did seem to help a bit compared to how she used to look. Unexplained images. This site from 2001 contains, well, unexplained images. Most of these are orbs, which in reality are probably just specks of dust on the camera lens. I don't know, man, there's just something so nostalgic about this site. I like it a lot. Let's look at Misty's orb. There are two unexplained things in this pic. The first is why in hell my uncle, the person in pic, would ever take a pic of himself in that pose is very unexplainable. And the second is the orbs in the right hand of the pic. This was taken at night. Thanks. Yeah, why would your uncle take a picture in a pose like that? That is very unexplainable. TheShadowlands.net. Okay, I'm breaking my rule here, this site isn't dead, it's still being updated even in 2023, but it's a really cool site that very much embraces its status as Web 1.0, and most of these pages haven't been touched in 20 years anyways. The Shadowlands.net catalogs various urban legends, cryptids, unexplained events, hauntings, unsolved mysteries. It's got it all. This is the perfect example of the sort of online content that would shape all online horror content to come. Go look up a cryptid Iceberg video and tell me that they're not talking about a lot of the stuff that's on this site. Like this article on spontaneous human combustion. Doesn't this feel like something you've seen before? This is the sort of stuff that would give me nightmares as a kid, and I loved it. Sites like this greatly influence what I personally find creepy, and I'm sure there are a lot of creators out there who feel the same way. And with that, we're at the last level of this iceberg, the depths. There's only one thing on this level, the Usenet archives. Okay, yeah, I'm breaking my rule again here, but this time for a pretty good reason. I know I said I only wanted to talk about things that are still available on the live internet, but the thing is, Usenet was never on the internet. At least not the same internet we use today. Usenet was a worldwide distributed discussion system that was made in 1980. It allowed computers to send threaded messages to each other over a network, in a structure very similar to a modern-day forum. It was restricted mostly to universities since it predated the World Wide Web by 11 years. The network infrastructure just wasn't there yet for home use. When going on Usenet, you would choose which news group you want to post in, much like choosing a subreddit. You could, for example, go on the movies group and make a post with your review about the brand new E.T. movie that had just come out. What's interesting about Usenet is that a lot of its news groups have been mirrored on the modern-day internet in the form of an archive. Using this, you can browse internet posts dating all the way back to 1980. Just think about how absurd that is. You can browse posts that were made when John Lennon was still alive. This is the deepest into the dead internet we're gonna get. So let's take a look at some Usenet posts. In 1982, Marsh Gosnell wrote on the video game group saying, "Just heard on the news that the Surgeon General has said that video games may be hazardous to your health. He cites evidence that links violence in video games to errant behavior. I wonder how soon the attack mode on games will be required to show a warning message, and when cartridges will have to be appropriately labeled, on the side in small letters like cigarettes, of course." Mark Webber responds saying, "Regarding the Surgeon General's warning on video games, their violence and errant behavior, I have noticed that since purchasing my ColecoVision that I have developed unnatural fears of such things as rolling barrels, fireballs, large simians, carnivorous insects, turnstile doorways, skulls, dungeon rooms, spaceships, rocket bombs, and other objects that harass me while attending my controller." Yeah, I'm not going to read all of that, but I think it's fair to say that Mark was doing a little trolling to stand up for his fellow gamers. Also on the video games board in 1983, Alan Berenbaum writes, "Does anyone have any info on Atari's ZT game? A friend of mine received one for Christmas and neither she nor her 10-year-old daughter can figure it out. If anyone knows the basic principles of play, could you please let me know? If not, is anyone interested in a slightly used ET cartridge?" E.T. on Atari is of course infamous for being possibly the worst video game ever made. It's no wonder Alan's friend couldn't figure it out, nobody could. Later in 1983, Atari would bury millions of their unsold cartridges, most of them being E.T. cartridges, in what would become known as the Atari video game burial. Something I found interesting on Usenet was that they had a group called Bizarre where people would just shitpost. A lot of the posts here are just nonsense. Remember that these are mostly engineers studying at prestigious universities. I did like this post from Bizarre from 1985 by Dan DeSaro about a cool license plate he saw. La Truck. Bob Neber responds saying, "Please, let's not have that license plate crop in Bizarre." Disco Duck responds to Bob saying, "Please, let's not have that flame crop in Bizarre." Yeah, remember when people used to say flaming on the internet? That really stuck around a long time. I remember College Humor made that "We Didn't Start the Flame War" video. That must have been in like the 2010s. In 1982, on the movie board, Jane Collymore wrote, "Could someone mail me the location of where the Star Trek II movie is playing? Relatively close to my area. I live in Piscataway, New Jersey, and wouldn't mind traveling 45 minutes to get to it." Aw, come on, just Google it. Oh, right. Also in 1982 on the miscellaneous board, an anonymous user wrote regarding VHS tapes, "My suggestion is to hold off. Sony and the other manufacturers have agreed on a new standard, neither beta nor VHS. It is scheduled for, I believe, 1984 or 1985. I wonder how that worked out for him. This is just a selection of what you can find on Usenet. It's pretty surprising how modern all of this feels considering everything here was written during the Cold War. You know, all of this exploration of these forgotten pieces of the internet has got me thinking. As humans, we tend to follow a pattern. We build great things, monuments, buildings, art. We cherish them, but then at some point in time, we leave them behind. These great things then lay abandoned, and over time they're pillaged, wrecked, eroded, and they become ruins. Then at some point in time, we collectively decide that these things are important pieces of history, and our attitude changes. We suddenly want to protect and restore these things as much as possible. I think the same thing is happening with the internet. We can protect stuff like Web 1.0 and Usenet pretty easily with archives, but Web 2.0 makes things a lot more complicated. Some big companies like Facebook make it incredibly difficult to not just archive content, but to even just browse historical content in the first place. And then what about mobile apps? There are many mobile game preservation projects, but I don't see people trying to preserve more everyday experiences like social media apps. Can you even picture in your head what it was like to use Instagram in 2012? It may not seem important now, but one day in the distant future, we might change our minds. Anyways, as always, thanks for watching.